And we are recording now. So I want to go through and show you guys the stuff that I put up on the modules page. Let me share my screen. It is this one. So I've put under week one, the last week, I put the entirety of the chapter 9 from the book, since it still is in transit to the bookstore. People haven't been able to get to it. So I just, went ahead and swore fair use, under copyright to whoever was listening. And I copied the first chapter and was able, and I put it up online so that you guys can at least have chapter 9. That should get you through next week. And I've also down here put the Moogles section for this week's reading, in case you haven't been able to get to that. And I think, see, and then I added a few more of these firsthand accounts, these little supplemental readings that can probably kind of give you a little bit more of a understanding of what it was like to live or to visit the Ottoman Empire or the Mughal Empire, just sort of an outsider's point of view of what's going on in there. So let's see. Stop sharing. So how's everybody doing? You can give me a thumbs up if you're doing great. If not, you can just kind of, yeah, there you go. We have some thumbs up. Yeah. So I hope everyone is being able to get to the class discussion board and the class assignments. The first of the introduce yourself is going to be closing on the 12th. And so the next couple of days I'll start going through and grading that, and then I'll start grading your first writing assignment this weekend at the latest, so that you can guys see exactly what I'm looking for in your writings, and then that'll help you as you go along. I'll try to get that graded ASAP in the next couple of days. That way you don't have to start your next assignment basically in the dark. You can go ahead and know exactly what I am looking for. And if anyone has any questions, you can email me. I'm catching up on all the emails, catching up on everything. The due dates are pretty set in stone, unless you have some issue, or like, for example, the fact that the books that people are still having trouble getting the book. I'm not going to be as stringent here this first semester, but the further we go in, the more stringent I am, and the more that you're in communication with me, as far as as far as things go. Like, for example, if you have an emergency, or just or having issues with the assignments, you just let me know and I will work with you on that. Understand that even on in a normal semester, things are going to pop up and people are going to be having issues, but this is a completely extraordinary semester and circumstances. So I'm going to be a little bit even more lenient than I have. I think I saw it online that, I'm ready to be living in precedented times by this point. I'm tired of all this unprecedentedness that we are going through. So, everyone's got their issues. Everyone has things that happen, and I'm here to help you succeed, give you the tools to succeed. So, like I said, if you have any issues, just email me and I will work with you. Okay. So, without any more issues, I'll go ahead and get started. I will move And share my screen. There you go. Everyone see that? Just want to make sure that I'm showing the right screen. Let me grab the chat, and the chat is open. I have my eyes on it. Okay, so let me get everybody in focus. Okay, so today we are going to be going over a bit more of a look at the Muslim empires that are basically what is causing Europe to try to find ways around the Mediterranean, around overland routes. And as we go into next week, when we look at the age of conquest and exploration, we will see, you know, what these consequences of the rise and fall of the Islamic empires are. But of course, before we get really into what's going on around 1500, we need to take a step back and see exactly what how the Muslim world got to where it is at this time. So the reason we have so many different Islamic empires, the reason that we have competing empires and competing issues is that there was a great schism in Islam very, very quickly into the into the origins of Islam. So basically, you have in Islam the rise of the Prophet Muhammad in 622. And very quickly, he begins to convert and conquer people in the Arabian Peninsula. And quickly, you see that the empire is booming, that things are really changing throughout the world, and the Prophet Muhammad is at the forefront. However, the Prophet Muhammad falls ill and is about to die, and he has a choice on who will take over. And there are two different men that are seen as the most qualified candidates, and that is Abu Bakr Abdullah ibn Uthman, who is the Prophet Muhammad's father-in-law and the basically his first convert to Islam. And then on the other side, you have Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is Muhammad's son-in-law. So and by blood related, he is his cousin. So there are two sides that think that you know, one side that is a lot more well connected thinks Ali should be, and another side that's a lot more conservative thinks that Abu Bakr. And so there's debates back and forth. The Prophet Muhammad says does not really give a good idea of who he wants to be the new caliph. And so after the Prophet Muhammad dies, it is chosen that Abu Bakr will be the new caliph. And so Ali goes away kind of angry at what's happened, and then Abu Bakr is going to pass away also. And instead of Ali going, it will be the new caliph will be Umar ibn al-Khattab, who's actually called the second father of Islam. And after Umar comes Uthman ibn Affan, who expands the empire even more, but at the cost of more cronyism and more more corruption within the ranks of Islam. And Uthman himself is actually going to be assassinated by his enemies, and it is only after the death of Uthman that Ali ibn Abi Talib comes into power. And because of this, there is a split in Islam where uh, uh, most of Muslims believe in the validity of all the caliphs, while a subsect believe that those that came before Ali are not really valid, and any of their ideas are not valid in this regard. So you have this schism that happens very early on in the origins of Islam, whereas in Christianity it takes a few hundred years for the first schism to happen, and then you have schism after schism after schism until you finally have, by 1500, you have the breaking away of the Reform religions or Reform sects, and later Protestant sects moving away. Really, in Islam, you have this happen very quickly. And so from the very beginning, there are issues within Islam where it comes to interdenominational and intersexual issues. And so you have what's ready to be a powder keg and competing ideas. And on top of this, you start adding a lot more not a lot more ethnic issues and old rivalries from way back. And it leads to a very combustible empire, but it is an empire that actually actually leads to a great new empire. It is said that during the Renaissance, you had wars, you had all these upheavals, yet humanity moved forward. Humanity recaptured great things, and you have that same thing happening in the early ages of Islam, where there is a lot of warfare, there is a lot of conquest, a lot of infighting, yet you have this great empire that comes out of it. And yes, thanks for answering that, Brian. So you have this great empire that comes. You have this golden age that comes out of all this. And the question I'm posing here to the class is, what is a golden age? If you were to describe a golden age, what would you say it was? Yes, Brian. Hold on. It didn't unmute you for some reason.
Thank you. When a golden age would be when an era was at its peak, when everything was just going as peachy keen as can be. So for Hollywood, the golden era was in the 50s and the 40s, when movies were just rip roaring and there really wasn't much else for entertainment.
Okay. Golden age is at the peak. What else? Yes, Liam.
It's when a bunch of stuff is being made, like there's a cultural God, I can't think of it. There's like a bunch of technologies being made, there's a bunch of inventions being invented. Basically all this stuff happens nearly at the same time, basically.
So you have technological advancements, cultural advancements happening during this time. It is at a peak. Stone, do you have something?
Yeah, a golden age to me is also when everyone can agree, looking back, that was the best time. Like the Simpsons golden age was the first 9 seasons. That's what everybody seems to agree on. So
Right. So and right there, Stone hit exactly what I'm thinking. What I'm going to get into is looking back at this time period. Oftentimes the people that are living during the time period are just living. They're not really looking at it, say, oh, hey, we're living in the golden age. Just like last week, I talked that no one was saying, isn't it great that we're in the Renaissance? It is something that looked at later on by people that are looking back. And there is a danger to this idea of a golden age. And does anybody know what that would be? Yes, Brent.
Glossing over the failures or faults that are happening at that time and kind of just brushing them under the rug.
Yeah, that's part of it, is that the you kind of look at it in rose-colored lenses. Jack? Oop, let me unmute you. There you go. You just hold down the space bar, you should be able to. There you go.
Honestly, I lost what I was going to say. I had it and I completely forgot. So sorry.
That's okay. That's sometimes the bad thing about Zoom, is that you're spending so much time trying to get going that you forget. If you remember, just type it out in the chat. But yeah, you start looking. You look back at the golden age, and you begin to say that, oh, everything was great. There were no real issues here. But if something else is the golden age, what does that say about your time then? If you're looking back at something, oh my God, this was a great time, what does that say about what you are experiencing? Harry, what do you think?
I don't think too many people say COVID was a golden age.
Right.
I was thinking that you're not as appreciative of your time, and you think the golden age is just better.
Yeah, you start looking at something back in the past as something that needs to be recaptured, instead of being able to really look at the past and say, that was great for that time. Instead, you say, we need to go back to that time. Instead of taking the lessons of that time, you instead say, let's go back to that time. Let's not move past this time. And you see that often in the course of this semester. You'll see that what happens in the time periods is that they want to go back. They want to go back and recapture something. Instead of creating something new, they want to go back. And that is one of the things that, if you call something the golden age, then you can never go back to that. You can never really recapture that. Or if that is the golden age, then everything that you do from that will be lesser. Unless you really want to create a platinum age, which no one has yet done. Then the golden age is all that we have. Like, for example, if you go back to that example of the golden age of Hollywood, well, what about the movies that are being done now? Back when we could go and see movies all those many months ago. What about those movies? There are things that, yeah, and it's exactly, Isabel says exactly what exactly what I'm going here, especially when we are in a time period like COVID. This is not going to be our golden age. We're definitely never really going to look at this as a golden age, but at this time, it's very dangerous to try to look at something that was before with rose-colored lenses, especially with the issues that we have today, and say, let's go back to that, instead of saying, well, let's try to move forward instead. So as we look throughout the semester, I will come back and look at this time period, look at this idea of a golden age and going back to it. And this would definitely be the idea of nostalgia. And we have definitely looked at the past a bit more favorably. Especially the more communication that we have, the more connected we are. We all have these shared memories of the past, and we can look and be a lot more nostalgic, because all of us remembers things like, for me, it's season 3 through 9 of The Simpsons that are really the best one. We can, but I can from here, as soon as I turn this off, I can go to Disney Plus, pop on an episode of The Simpsons from that, and just live in that era. instead of kind of realizing that we're never going to go back to that era. So in this time period, in other time periods, we'll see more about this idea of a golden age. But one of the things about this so-called of the idea of the golden age of Islam is that this was the at least in terms of the expansive peak of the Islamic empires. This was exactly when Islam spread the quickest, and it fundamentally changed the makeup of of what was Persia, of parts of India, into Central Asia, definitely the Middle East, and the Arabian Peninsula, Northern Africa, in the Egyptian Nile Delta, even into Spain. You see that that during this age of Islam, you have the most drastic change in these parts of the world. And like I said, even Spain has a lot of Muslim influence and a lot of that Islamic influence in architecture, in art, even some of the language that then gets sent out into the Spanish colonies. So you have a lot of change during this what's known as the Golden Age, and it really is the equivalent of the Renaissance to Islam, because this is where you have improvements in science. This is where you have improvements in art, in architecture. This is where you have religious improvements, where oftentimes you would see a lot more secularization and a lot more religious tolerance than later on. And this is part of that that we just talked about, that golden age thinking, that you want to go back to this past. And oftentimes you gloss over the things that you don't want to gloss over whenever you look at extremists and radicals that want to create a new caliphate, that want to go back to this golden age of Islam. One of the things that is glossed over is the fact that at this point, Islam was a lot more tolerable to other religions than even Europe was. At this time, if you were Jewish, it was a lot safer to live in the Muslim world than it was to live in Europe, especially going into the early 1300s, where in Europe you're starting to see the Black Death and the pogroms against Jews. In the meantime, you have Jewish intellectuals that are in the courts of a lot of the Islamic leaders. So it is a true period of learning, a true period of intermixing of cultures, and is a true period of expansion for Islam, basically from 622 to 900. So that's an expansive time. And then what happens is that this all changes with the Crusades. The Crusades are they're really a watershed moment in the world affairs between Islam and the Christian states. Everyone, is anyone here not familiar with the Crusades? If you're not familiar with the Crusades, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll get someone to try to explain the Crusades. There you go. Yeah. So who wants to help explain the Crusades for me? There you go, Brian.
My understanding is that essentially the Catholic Church wanted to regain the Holy Lands from the Muslim religion folks, and that's where they started marching on into Palestine and to basically reclaim it.
Right, and there's that idea of reclaim it. Christians had left the Holy Land a long time ago and had set up in Rome. But what happens for the most part is that the Crusades begin as a religious excursion. The peasants' revolt starts off these religious battles. The Pope has been trying to figure out ways to take over parts of the Holy Land. Part of that reason is that you have a lot of pilgrims. A lot of it is religious, but then you have this idea that you have a lot of pilgrims that go there, and they go and give money to the holy sites. And a lot of this money is going to non-Christian people, and the Pope and a lot of the leaders want a cut of that. And so after the first crusade happens, a bunch of peasants go and are killed trying to storm the Holy Land. Then the Pope calls for anybody to come and fight for him. And it's not really kings that go in. It's basically petty noblemen who don't have a lot of land, who don't have a lot of power. They go and help the Pope and raise forces and take parts of the Holy Land, and then all of a sudden they're extremely rich. And then afterwards is when you have the later Crusades, and Liam will get to that in a second. Later Crusades become much more about money, much more about power. You have people like Richard the Lionhearted, the great king of England. If anyone's ever seen Robin Hood, any of the Robin Hoods, his brother Prince John and King Richard the Lionhearted play a big role in that. You have people like the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, the great giant man, flaming red beard, that decides to storm a river in full armor, and his horse gets spooked and he falls into a river wearing complete plate mail and is washed away and drowns, and basically leaves the Holy Roman Empire with a crisis of succession and never recovers. And you have, even on the side of the Muslims, you have great respected leaders like Saladin, who is a warrior king and is actually very well respected by his enemies. And you end up having a stalemate throughout most of the Crusades. And then in 1204, this stalemate leaves the Crusaders really mad that they didn't get to march to Jerusalem and take it over. And so instead, in 1204, the Catholic Christian Crusaders are going to sack the city of Constantinople, the Orthodox Christian city of Constantinople. So yes, Liam, this is where it just becomes one big looting party, as the Crusaders were basically forced their way into Constantinople, overstayed their welcome, and then went back and looted the whole place, killing Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike throughout. So the Crusades themselves end in the late 1200s, with the Holy Land still in Muslim control, but pilgrims are allowed to go in and undisturbed for the most part, and you still have the Islamic states surviving and still thriving. And even throughout the Crusades, you have a great amount of learning, a great amount of technological advancement. And then there's one thing that will always kill any innovation, and that are the Mongols. The Mongols are really what ends not only the Crusader period, but also the golden age of Islam, the Islamic dynasties in the East, and really moves into the West and basically destroys the West by spreading the plague through their ships. So the Mongols come in, and not only do the Mongols lead to the death of 60% of European population, they also are going to be the ones that that basically end the golden age of Islam and break up the Islamic territories. They're the ones that are going to storm Baghdad, which was the center of learning in the entire world. They had one of the greatest libraries the world had ever seen, on par with that of the Library of Alexandria, and it is burned to the ground by the Mongol invaders. And pretty much after that, all of the trade caravans, all of the roads that were once used in the East are going to basically be forgotten, and only the bravest of the brave are going to try to trade among throughout the North Africa into Persia and try to get to China in the East. And so the Great Library of Baghdad suffers, as did the Library of Alexandria. The trade routes in the Muslim world suffer the same way that the trade routes in Europe do after the Mongol hordes come in. And this is where we really are going to pick up the story here in the late 13th century, where you have the Muslim world basically broken, just as the European world was broken by the effects of the Mongol invasion. The plague did spread through the Middle East, and the plague spread through there first. However, one of the reasons why it doesn't kill as many people in the Middle East is that the people of the Middle East were a lot more sanitary than the people of Europe. They were a lot more conscious of water and what diseases could come through water. They were a lot more conscious of what you did with bodies. And so basically the equivalent of social distancing and wearing masks was able to save a lot of the Muslim world at that time. So it did affect them first, and they were the ones that really wrote down about the Mongols throwing disease-riddled bodies into cities, but they were able to survive a little bit better than Europeans were. Any other questions? So by the time we get to the beginning, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, you have a very broken Muslim world. You have a Muslim world that has parts of it are intermixing with the Mongol forces. Other parts are fighting amongst themselves, and the Ottomans actually have their origins way back in the early parts of the Muslim world. You have the Turkic people, the Oghuz Turks, are the ancestors of the Ottoman Turks that we know to this day. The Turks were a nomadic tribe that came from Asia and the steppes of modern day Mongolia, really in the second millennia BC, coming into making it all the way into what is now modern day Turkey. And at the very beginning, they were used by Islamic forces as mercenaries and as warriors. And pretty soon they actually begin to adapt Islam and become very fervent believers in Islam. And eventually they're going to take over the decaying forces. They're going to move in and create the Seljuk Empire, one of the most important empires in the in the Golden Age of Islam, and they're going to control a vast amount of territory. Then, like I said, comes war, comes famine, come the Mongols, and pretty soon you have you have a Khazmid empire that basically is a much more Persian empire, Khazmid empire that is much more Persian, while over here you have the Seljuks remain. So this empire here that will lead to the Safavids is much more Persian, much more has descendants of the Mongols, Greeks, all these different different ethnicities mixed in that have ethnic issues with the Turks, with Arabs, and have those religious issues of the Sunni versus Shia. So there are all these things at play at this time. You know, there are religious issues, ethnic issues, nationalistic issues that are just brimming in the Muslim world. So as I showed last time, here is the map here at the beginning of the 14th century. As Europe is beginning to move into the Renaissance, this is what's left of the Byzantine Empire, what was once the eastern half of the Roman Empire, what once made it all the way back and almost took the entirety of the Roman Empire back, is now basically Constantinople and parts of Greece. And here you have the tribal lands of Osman. Osman Osman the first of the Turks, will be this leader that brings his people out of this tribal land and begins to create a bigger empire, begins to conquer, begins to unite. And here is his lands at the beginning of his reign, basically 2 cities worth, and by the end of his 40-year reign, he has taken over this swath of land and begins to move out towards this. And then later on, by the end of the 1300s, you have much more land taken over. And then basically by 1389, at the beginning of the reign of Murad I, basically Constantinople stands alone. It has been completely overtaken by the Ottoman Turks, all this land, except for some different areas such as the Principality of Wallachia. The Principality of Wallachia is one of the areas that is able to actually resist being conquered by the Ottomans, resist being taken over, and will basically be playing people back and forth. So here is the Ottoman Empire in 1451. At the beginning of the reign of Mehmed Mehmed II, Mehmed the Conqueror, he will be the one that finally breaks through in 1453 and takes over, destroys Constantinople, comes through, and finally takes the city, takes the land, and Eastern Orthodoxy is basically made subservient here in the middle, in its origin land. Any questions about this rise? You can see here was the land of Osman, and by in in the early 1300s, and then by 1453, they've taken over the entirety of the Greek peninsula. And so you have all of these different people. The Ottoman Empire will survive until 1918. So from that small land in 1299 up until 1918, you have an Ottoman Empire, at least partial, and we'll definitely come back. And so you have this new Muslim empire that is taken and has conquered the Byzantine Empire, has conquered the Greek Orthodox Church, has begun to continue to expand. And the question I ask of you, if you were a leader, what is more important, power or faith? Imagine yourself at the head of, it doesn't even have to be a Muslim empire, it could be a Christian, Jewish, whatever it is, what is more important to you? Gaining more power or the faith of the faithful? Irfan, do you have one or the other?
I would go with faith.
And why would you say faith?
Because faith brings power.
Faith can bring power, yes. However, if you have too much faith, you can't really expand too much, because there are going to be some issues of your faith that say, I can't compromise. You have to take some compromises. Anyone else? Anyone? Trinity also says that faith is more important than power. Saba disagrees with Irfan. She says that power is more important. Why do you say that, Saba? Let me get you unmuted. There you go. There you go. You should be unmuted. I think so. Yeah. Oh, is it your phone? You can go ahead and type out. And I'll come back to you. Brian asks, didn't many leaders use people's faith as a means to them? Yeah, well, that's part of it, is that you can use faith to get more powers, as Irfan said. Anybody else have power as the more important? Because power is something that you have to be willing to make different strides for. You have to be able to sometimes suppress issues with your faith. You know, you can expand your territory with power. If your faith says that you cannot keep if you have to walk a certain path, then you really can't make some of the moves that you need to gain power. On the other hand, with too much power, you have the issues of stepping on people's faith. Stone, you said power. You said power would be more important to you as in this time period. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think they're both equally, but you know, if I had to choose, I'd probably say power, because I think power, when it comes to negotiations and, you know, strength and having to overcome anything, I would probably say having the resources and the power to get whatever you need will probably be a little more important than faith. But I think both are just as important.
Okay. And Armin agrees that power and faith must be used equally. And that's exactly what I agree with, that you have to walk this fine line. But that is the issue, isn't it? Walking that fine line. You know, let's say you are a leader and you're asked to attack a city during a holy day, but this is the only day that you can actually win. By attacking the city, you will win the war, but how many people will you piss off basically by doing so? What sort of faith, what sort of issues come from things like this? So this is not an easy question. This is not one that has a definitive answer, but what we're going to be looking at in these three empires, the three gunpowder empires, are the ways that you can balance power and faith throughout. And we will see how power and faith run into conflict with one another. And we will see the ways that people bend power and faith, use power and faith. And before we have seen that secular societies do advance more slowly. You know, you have because of this trying to balance things. So we were going to be looking at in these three empires this balancing act. But first, what I wanted to look at is a good case study in how to use power, how to use faith, and how this balance of power and faith ends up being very makes a person's name known much more than it would have normally. We're going to be looking at Vlad the Third of Wallachia. Has anybody ever heard of Vlad the Third? That's right, Liam.
Dracula?
Vlad the Impaler. And Brian, his more common name?
Count Dracula.
Count Dracula. Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler is, some people say that he is the basis of Dracula. This is yes and no. The way that he gains power makes him more infamous. And so he's written about in stories. And basically what happens is Bram Stoker is doing some research. The only book that he has about Wallachia is a overview, and he sees the name Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and he says, that sounds like a really cool name. I'm going to use that, and just kind of stops reading there. But Vlad Dracula, very handsome man, not going to lie. Very nice mustache. Very, very nice long hair. I don't know why he wanted his eyes that big in the painting, but he did. Yeah, and he, Vlad the Impaler was the son of Vlad II, Vlad Dracul, and Vlad Dracul is known as Vlad Dracul because he belongs to the Order of the Dragon. The Order of a Dragon is a society like the Knights Templar or the later on the Masons. It's a society that comes together, and the big thing about the Order of the Dragon is that they say we will fight against the Ottomans, we will fight against Muslims to our dying breath. We will never allow them, we will never follow them or allow them to take our lands. Well, Vlad Dracul is a little smarter than that, and he sees that that Wallachia is going to be completely overtaken by Murad II, and he becomes subservient to Murad II, pays tribute, gives money to Murad II, and Murad leaves Wallachia alone. That's why you see Wallachia as a vassal state instead of being conquered. Vlad Dracul said that decided that keeping power, keeping his people safe, keeping Wallachia in control of its own destiny was more important than this oath, was more important than this strict faith that he had. And part of the reasons why is because a lot of the people that he swore allegiance with the Order of the Dragon, they didn't come to their help. The Holy Roman Empire, the Hungarians, they didn't come to help Wallachia out. And so Draco comes and decides to become a vassal state of the Ottomans. Well, this makes some people angry. And so the Hungarian Empire sends John Hunyadi, one of their best knights, out, and Hunyadi fights against Vlad Dracul, and Hunyadi captures him and has him executed. And Hunyadi puts in Vladislav II. Vladislav is Dracul's nephew and Dracula's cousin. And so now the Hungarians have this new person in charge. The Hungarians have made Wallachia a vassal state of theirs. And so John Hunyadi continues his march against the Ottomans. Hunyadi is going to fight against Mehmed the Conqueror, and he's actually going to defeat Mehmed the Conqueror. He's actually going to beat the man who stormed Constantinople. And he is warned to not continue on. He needs to wait for reinforcements. But John says, no, I can do this. I can win. And he fights and he continues to beat them. But then John catches the plague. The plague hits John Hunyadi, kills him. And this is where Vlad Dracula. Dracula, son of the dragon, is what Dracula means. So it is a really cool name. I could see why Bram Stoker is like, that's a really cool name. I like it. And so Vlad Dracul comes in with the help of the Ottomans, and takes Wallachia over again, kills Vladislav II. And then sometime during this, the records don't say what happened because the records have been lost, conveniently enough. Vlad Dracula turns against the Ottomans and hooks back up with the Holy Roman Emperor and becomes a force against the Ottomans. And so the Ottomans fight against the Christians, against Dracula, and Dracula attacks the Ottomans at night, which was actually at that point was kind of taboo. You know, you wanted to fight fairly. You wanted to fight honorably. You didn't attack people while they were sleeping. You know, you met them on the field of battle honorably, but instead Dracula burns down the encampments and fights during the dark. There you go, already starting this legend of his, this dark legend of his, fighting during the middle of the night, not coming out during the day, hiding, running away, killing at night. And then he has, according to legend, thousands of people as he continues to expand outward, conquering more land. He has thousands of people put on stakes. And the Ottoman historians say that they come to march towards Wallachia, and the entire border of Wallachia is lined with over 20,000 people put on stakes. And they go to talk to Vlad Tepes, and he's eating his Sunday dinner right by the rotting bodies. And he dares them to attack. And so the Ottomans fight against him with his brother, Radu the Handsome, as he's called. So you have a Christian, Vlad Tepes, fighting with the Holy Roman Empire against an ostensibly Christian Radu, his brother, who is fighting with the Ottomans, moving against each other, fighting, and eventually Radu will defeat Vlad in combat. He will, as I think Liam said, he'll be decapitated. Apparently, his head was sent to Murad II, who is now to Mehmed II, who is the Ottoman emperor. He'll be decapitated. All of his men will be buried, will be executed and buried. And the legend goes that Vlad Dracula still haunts Wallachia. And fun note, Transylvania is next to Wallachia, but Vlad was never ruled Transylvania. That's just another name that Bram Stoker thought was really neat and used that. So that is the legend of Vlad Dracul. You guys know more about it now than Bram Stoker did when he wrote his story. Just note that this is exactly what is going on at this time in the Balkan area, in this time period, in this area, that people are switching allegiances. People are looking out for themselves, their power base, their people. They are not really, this is this whole thing. You can have all the faith like John Hunyadi did. You can march through, take out your enemies, and then all of a sudden you catch the plague and you die. Or you can be like Vlad and Radu, that play each other off, that end up fighting each other in combat and killing each other. There is no real way to win in this. This is a time frame where the best that you can hope for is to live to the next battle, is to have something at the end of the day. And this is why people like Vlad II will gladly become vassals to the Ottomans, because that at least ensures some survival. If you fight back, or if you try to double cross people, you will end up beheaded with your head on a silver plate in front of the Ottoman king, or having or being executed by your enemies. I think there has been when I was looking for photos or for pictures of Vlad, I saw several movie frames. I think there's like at least 3 or 4 movies about Vlad that were probably filmed in like Budapest or something out there, and are about his reign of terror throughout. So you can definitely find some nice cheesy horror movies, especially as we go into October, about the dread of Vlad Dracul. Any other questions about this? You can see that power and faith aren't exactly, it doesn't have to be either or for people at this time, but know that there are consequences for that not being an either or. And the Ottomans really know this, and the Ottomans, as they continue to expand, are going to continue to use this vassal system and continue to use what's known as the Pasha system. The Pasha system basically leaves people that know the area, people that were in charge of the areas, still with some semblance of control in the areas that are conquered by the Ottoman Empire. So in North Africa, they will leave North African leaders. In the Balkans, they will leave people like leave people that might still be Christians with some level of power. As long as it doesn't conflict with Islamic law, they will still leave them. They'll have some sort of autonomy. So they will not impose strict religious law upon the people. You'll have a millet system. These were called, these are pashas, Pasha. And this was ruled under a millet system, Millet, which basically gave minority or conquered majority some sort of religious law, religious comeuppance. So you can actually live peacefully within the Ottoman Empire. And so the more that the Ottoman Empire expands, the more that they leave people in charge, that allows them to have Wallachia still under Christian control, some of the Crimean states still under Christian control, as they continue to expand outward, leading to the reign of Suleiman I, Suleiman the Magnificent, who reigned from 1520 to 1566. Suleiman the Magnificent was a successful diplomat and warrior. And once again, here is this idea of faith and power, as Suleiman the Magnificent allies himself with Francis I of France. Francis I sees that Suleiman is a threat to Hungary and Austria. And Austria and Hungary are the enemies of the French, as is the Holy Roman Empire. And he sees that this is a very profitable relationship. The Ottomans have had trade relations with the French going back to the early 1400s. Remember last time we talked about the 100 Years' War and how this was the first time that cannons are used in Europe. That's because of the Ottomans. The Ottomans sell cannons to the French. The Ottomans are the intermediaries between Asia and the West, and this only increases with the reign of Francis I, as Suleiman the Magnificent decides to ally with him. So by the end of Suleiman's reign, here is the extent of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire has taken North Africa, has taken Cairo, has taken most of, has made excursions into Persia, here is Vienna, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire is marching towards that. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask, one of the things that I had been asked after class last time was, what happened to the Italian states? Why aren't the Italian states as powerful as they could have been? And here is the reason why. Where can Italy go? How exactly can Italy prosper here? Or the Italian states? If they try to sail to North Africa, they have to basically come to the Strait of Gibraltar. If they want to go anywhere, they are trapped by the Ottoman Empire. Harry, where do the other European states go?
North.
They go north? Anywhere else?
To the Americas.
To the Americas. Or they go down to Africa. They go all the way around the Horn of Africa, but the Italian city-states are trapped. The Italian city-states that before the Ottoman Empire controlled the Mediterranean were the richest because they could trade anywhere. When the Ottomans were simply controlling Anatolia, they could go into Damascus, go into Cairo, get around everything. But by the end of the 1500s, the Italian city-states are trapped, and they cannot go anywhere. So this is why the Italian city-states, even though they were the beginning of the Renaissance by 1566, they are becoming a minor player in European affairs. They still have money, they still have wealth to push around, they still have wealthy families that they can marry into other countries. But for the most part, the Italian city-states are no longer going to be the great seafaring people, the great merchant people that they were from the 1300s into the early 1500s. So at this point, you have a complete control by the Ottomans of the Mediterranean. Any questions? So, as I talked about in the lecture, the Ottoman society really flourishes during this time, especially since you have a much more tolerant empire, a much more wealthy empire. You have the advancements in philosophy and religion, because the Ottomans are much more willing to bring people in and debate about religion, only to a point, of course. You have the creation of great mosques, creation of great tiles. You have a flourishing culture. The Ottomans are beginning to make more incursions into Europe, as far as intellectually as well, as you have the idea of the Indian school take hold in Europe. Now, has anybody ever done has anybody ever seen the way that European schools work? Like done any sort of study abroad, or have an understanding of the European system? Okay. If no one has, then I can show this to you. So let's say, Jacqueline, let's say, what's your favorite subject? Get you unmuted here. There you go. Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Oh.
What's your favorite subject?
My favorite, or arts, between those.
Okay. Let's say art. Okay. Let's say back in this time period, if you wanted to study art, what you would do is you would go to a university, find an art professor, and say, I want to study with you. That's the way that you did. And our professor would probably tell you, okay, read these 5 books and come see me next week. And we're going to talk about these books. All right, you would talk about those books, and the next week you would say, all right, read these 7 books and come back to me. And you would be like, am I doing well? Is everything good? Well, keep reading. And then
it was kind of like a mentor.
Yeah, it was
kind of like a mentor kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. And then eventually the mentor would say, okay, you are ready. Tell me everything that you know. And they would say, okay, that's great. You are now qualified to be an art history major or professor yourself. So there you go. Now you are allowed to, as a professor dies, they might say, okay, now you take his place. Cool. Now somebody would come to you and say, I want to study art. And then you would continue that way. And that's the way that universities were. And so you can see that limit the amount of people that could go to university, that would limit the scope of knowledge that was passed down. What if this mentor of yours didn't really understand everything about a certain type of history, certain type of art? Well, that would just sort of, that information would sort of fall away. And so as Christian missionaries are moving into the Ottoman Empire, are talking to the Ottoman Empire, they find this school. They find this school system where all the youngsters of the Ottoman Empire are available for to apply to this type of school. They go in and they take tests, and they basically become enculturated in Turkish history, Turkish ideas, Turkish law, Islamic history, Islamic art, and they might come out as soldiers. So a little bit better than merchants, or a little bit better than skilled tradesmen. They come out as soldiers, they fight, they get some land. Boom. That at least moves them up in society. If they are the top of the top, they might choose to go to Istanbul to one of the major universities or the Enderun schools. So there they would take more tests, and if they passed, they would become janissaries, basically like knights. And so they would improve themselves that way. And then the top of those would continue and go into the palace school, where they would become administrators, but they become scientists and teachers. And the top of the top would then go and become viziers. And usually the viziers, the people that could afford to go to the palace school or had the grades to go to the palace school, were noblemen, were nobility. So you had this system here that looks very, very familiar to those of us today, where everyone goes and has that first draft, or the public education system, and then you can go into a university, go up even higher into a graduate program, and then maybe even get your PhD. And so this system, along with Asian test system, is what Christian missionaries copy. Because Christian missionaries and Christian educators are like, how do you know who's best? And they say tests, exams, moving into these schools. And this is why, along with Confucianist exams in the East, this is why our school system is the way it is. I would say viziers are equal to, let's say, business school grads, lobbyists, and politicians. That would be what I would say viziers were more like. They were the ones that either had great companies or created opportunities in business, or were able to become counselors to the royal court, or were noblemen that moved into administrative positions, higher level administrative positions. So the viziers were at the top of the top, and usually they started at the top of the top and just sort of stuck around there. So this system here is adapted into school system in Europe during the Renaissance, and then into the modern age. This is the template that gets sort of that Europeans are going to fudge with. Europeans are going to mix with their own system and create the education system that we really know to this day. So, any questions before we go to the harem? All right. Does anybody know what a harem is? Anybody heard this word?
Yes.
Yes, Liam. What is the harem?
It isn't a like one husband and then a multitude of wives. So basically, someone would marry like 4 or 5 different people at the same time.
That's part of it. That's part of it. Basically, the harem is seen as the place for women. Anything else? So, the harem. The harem is a word that's sort of fallen out of the public consciousness, but earlier in, even up until like the 1930s, 1940s, with the I want to say mysticism that people felt about the East. It's what's known as Orientalism. With this idea of Orientalism, is just basically that the West is normal, and everything outside of it is weird. Everything that's in the Orient, over in the East, is mystic and strange and not ours. And so the harem was, as Liam said, this place where the men would have their wives. Yeah, the traditional Islam is what is it? I lost the polygamist culture, where if you can afford to have multiple wives, you can have multiple wives. The thing is, you have to treat each wife the same. If you buy a gift for one wife, you have to buy it for everyone. So having multiple wives was a sign of wealth. I can afford to have multiple wives. I can afford to have a palatial estate where my wives live with our children. And one of the things about this harem was that men outside of the family were not allowed in. It was a place where it was just the immediate family with all of these women. And so, especially in the Victorian period, you would have all of these writers coming over, and they would say, what is that place? Where are all those women going? Well, they're going into the harem. They're going into a place where you are not allowed. And so European men would make up all these stories about what happened in the harem, how it was a place of debauchery, how it was a place where women ran around nude, where there were bacchanalias, basically drunken orgies, where all of these things happened. One of the first of the Victorian erotic novels is known as the Harem of the Turk. So they made this idea up about the harem because they weren't allowed in there. Because Western men weren't allowed in there, they basically used their imagination to make it as salacious as they could. Well, obviously, this is what happens in a harem. If only one man and all these women are in there, obviously this is what happens. But as Trinity said, it is the place where the family can go. Here is Topkaki Palace in Istanbul. This was the harem of the Sultan. This was his home. And in the harem, he was away from his viziers, usually. Basically, only like the upper level viziers could visit. So he could move away from all of this noise that was happening to him. If you are in charge of an empire, you have a lot of pressure on you. And this was a place where you could go. And in the Ottoman Empire, you have a time period that's known as the Sultanate of Women, where basically women have the ear of their husband. And women make a lot of the decisions in the empire. Because oftentimes when you have so many competing ideas, how many of you, anyone here that's married or in a relationship knows that sometimes when you get off of work, you go and you just unload about work to your significant other. And then they probably just say something simple like, well, why don't you just do this? And it's something that no one thinks about because they're outside of it. And this is what happened in the Ottoman Empire, but at a grand scale. Historians have seen this as the time when women really were the power behind the scenes of the Ottoman Empire. And this started with Suleiman the Magnificent and his wife, Hurrem Sultan. Hurrem Sultan was a Polish harem girl. So basically she was either captured or sold into slavery, and she caught the eye of Suleiman the Magnificent, and he raised her up and eventually married her. And under her guidance, he ruled the land and figured out who to promote, who to move around, who to make his heir. And Suleiman and Harem had a daughter named Mirima Sultan. And Mirima Sultan was the right-hand woman of Suleiman. She would follow him basically from adolescence all the way through her marriage up until Suleiman's death. She was there with him while he was marching into battle or talking negotiations. She was there as he was signing treaties with people, as he was negotiating. She was there with him. What's weird, another thing about her is that she actually had a husband at the time, Rustem Pasha, a pasha from Persia, a Persian pasha, who was a very powerful vizier, and they were married and they had a son, but it was one of those political marriages. And Rustem actually became the Grand Vizier because, basically Mirima was Suleiman's favorite daughter, and she asked him to make Rustem the Grand Vizier. Suleiman agreed. And Rustem, because he's Persian, he's actually able to broker peace between the Ottomans and the Safavids. And the Ottomans and the Safavids are able to have peace, and the Ottoman Empire is able to flourish even more. But what happens is that Harem convinces Suleiman to have his oldest son assassinated, and this ends up backfiring on them as the later leaders are not as great. And so Rustem is sent home. Mirima her power is diminished, and Hurrem actually has the ear less of the ear of Suleiman, and then but her son becomes the Sultan, and so she actually becomes basically the Queen Mother. After the reign of Hurrem, basically the mother of the Sultan runs the entire palace, has slaves, has spies everywhere, and basically is in charge of everything. And that is why this is known as the Sultanate of Women, because women are able to control the palace, control the information of the palace, and really help guide the Ottoman Empire here moving forward. So we're going to take a quick break here. Come back at let's say 8:01. Give us a 5-minute break to go stretch our legs for a little bit, and then we'll go into the Safavid dynasty and the Mughal Empire. I'll pause recording. Recording. Okay. So we will continue. Okay, so the downfall of the Ottoman Empire comes in World War I, but the downfall of the first golden age of the Ottoman Empire comes with the death of Suleiman the Magnificent. After Suleiman the Magnificent, you don't really have a succession of great leaders. As I said before, his wife Hurrem agreed to have Suleiman's first son assassinated, and so when Suleiman passed away, her son came to power. His name Selim II, who was also known as Selim the Drunk. So you can kind of see what the people thought about him and his ability to lead. Even his painting here seems like he had a couple before it. So Selim the Drunk only reigns for a few years before his son takes over. And it is at this time in the early 1600s that you actually have, or at the end of the 1500s, that you actually have the Ottoman Empire looking to create better ties with the Western world, create better ties with the country of England. Under Mehmed III, grandson of Selim, you actually had the idea that the English crown would ally itself with the Ottoman Empire in order to oppose the French and Austrian forces. And there was even talk of the Ottoman Empire moving into North America, trying to set up a colony in North America, but at this time, because of mismanagement of the empire by Selim and Murad III, who was Mehmed's father, you had a lot of anti-West sentiment. And so instead of continuing this, this idea of moving and becoming allied with the British crown, or excuse me, with the English crown, instead the Ottoman Empire closes in on itself and begins to attack Christian forces. Mehmed actually writes to Elizabeth and says that there's actually more we're actually more alike, the Protestants and the Muslims, than Protestants are with Catholics. And so there's this idea that they can use those religious, the religious schism in the Christian world to the Ottoman favor, but at this time, sentiment against the West is very low. Sentiment towards the West is very low, and so instead you have a continued fight, and this ultimately leads to the downfall of the Ottoman Empire as the Papal States call together the Holy League, or the League of Venice, and this is where I said that the Italian states at least had money. The Italian states were able to get the Habsburgs, the Spanish, Genoa, the Papal States, all together to come and defeat the Ottoman forces against the Austrians. And later on, you're going to have the Holy Roman Empire, the Russians, Albanians, and Serbs also come into this Holy League and come together against the Ottoman forces. In the 1590s, you have the Ottomans making the last push towards Vienna, but there's a harsh winter and their cannons freeze and they are forced to retreat, and they are never a threat to Central Europe again. After this, the Ottomans are going to, at the most, look into the Balkans to control that, but for the most part are going to be turned eastward to face against the Safavids. So that is the Ottoman Empire. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Cool. So the Safavids. So this Persian Empire of the Safavids has its rise with Shah Ismail I. Shah Ismail I consolidates power in Persia, consolidates the Shia forces, and creates a relatively stable empire. But this empire is trapped between two other empires. Here is Azerbaijan, modern day Azerbaijan, with Tabriz here as the homeland of the Safavids. Did I miss a chat? There you go. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so the here's Azerbaijan with Tabriz as the traditional homeland of the Safavids, and in between the Safavid Empire is between a Khanate of Bukhara and the Uzbeki people, and on the other hand are the Ottomans. So you have the Ottomans and the Uzbekis basically with a grip on the Safavids. The Safavids are going to later on consolidate and move their capital to Isfahan here, which is a lot safer, a lot further away from the Ottoman Empire, and it's actually going to be a lot safer for them to have their empire there. So, the Safavid Empire decides to go the other way. The Safavid Empire decides to go full on into faith, not so much into power. They have this feeling that that faith will lead to power. Under their great leader Shah Abbas the Great, they're going to curb the power of all the local chieftains. They're going to move out, fight against their enemies, and attain their greatest glory. And with their greatest glory comes cultural totalitarianism. Instead of having a cultural tolerance, they are going to force their religion, force their culture, force their ideas among the people that they conquer. They're going to force the other nations that have been trading in the area to acquiesce to harsh taxes, to harsh laws among the people. And so they are going to be much more fervent in their religion. And Shah Abbas is actually going to push a new type of Shia Islam, which is known as Twelver Islam, Twelver Shia, which is basically that there have been 11 imams in the world, and there is a hidden 12th one that will come in the end of times. So basically, this idea of this millennialist end of the world, we're all preparing for the end of the world type of religion comes forward, and that's why they have this. That's why they have such a fervor, is because they're getting things ready for the return of their Messiah. You want to create as great a paradise on earth as possible for the people to be ready. And so they push their faith on people. They push their culture on people. They push their politics on people instead of leaving people in charge. that were there, they're going to put their own nobility in charge of conquered lands. And so because of this, and because of the fact that you have such a small land base to begin with, you're not going to be able to, you're going to see that the Safavids aren't able to actually grow their land as much. Definitely not as much as the Ottomans. This culture, however, is going to be incredibly important, especially in that part of the world, much more in the 20th century. Later on, you're going to see the beginnings of this idea that you can't show. There's little idolatry, no showing of the prophet, no showing of different stories or events. Instead, calligraphy will be much more important. So in order to get around not being able to paint beautiful pictures in the books, Safavid poets and writers will instead turn to calligraphy and become great calligraphists, and use that as their way of art, as their way of showing art. You're going to see traditional carpet making pushed to such degree and be so valued that the European textile makers that will eventually get into Persia will see how beautiful they are, and they will completely copy them and mass manufacture them later on. Actual Persian rugs can run in, if they're a family that, even to this day, if they're a family that's been making it for centuries, they can run thousands upon thousands of dollars for a real Persian rug. But you can go to IKEA or the dump and buy a cheaply manufactured one. I went to the dump a few years ago, and they were having this big sale on Persian rugs, mass manufactured Persian rugs, and they were like $120, and you're like, okay, I'll take one. And if anyone asks, it's 100% real. They won't know. So that's in my library right now. Nice air quotes Persian rug. So this scarcity of this rugs and scarcity of the textiles make them much more valued among the European people, and becomes a symbol of richness to own rugs. The clothing of the Safavids is also becomes very desired among the elite in Europe. The wild colors, the great care that it's put into them becomes something that Europeans are really into, and they really want to emulate. And then you have the great architecture that is based almost entirely on religious ideals, religious values. Every building that is created has some sort of religious connotation to it, and some sort of ideal that way. So Safavid, just because the Safavids aren't expanding as much as they could, just because they are a much more closed off society, doesn't mean that they're not improving culturally. It's just that they don't do it on the scale of the Ottoman Empire, nor do they have the success of the Ottoman Empire. And one of the most important things that people don't know is that the Safavids actually invented the game of polo, the game of kings. They took a game that the Mongols used to play. Mongols would use heads on their horses with sticks, and they refined it a little. They took away the head, used a rubber ball, and made it much more the sport of nobility and horse riders, as they still have the Persian culture was still heavily influenced by their nomadic ancestry, and they were very skilled horse riders, especially among the nobility. And so they created this game that was much more civilized than what the Mongols did. They invented a version of chess as well. Oh yes, but yes, it was a human head. The Mongols would use heads of people that they captured, especially like generals or great warriors, and use that for their version of polo. But the Safavids also invented a type of chess, one that was later incorporated into a game that the Europeans had also invented, and sort of begins to mix. There's about like 10 different types of proto chess that are eventually brought into to create the chess that we know of today, and the Persian version is one of them as well. So the Safavids are actually are actually growing, and their culture within their empires is within the nobility especially is flourishing, but throughout the empire it's not nearly as I don't know what shogi is. I will look up shogi later on and let you know. So the downfall of the Safavid is basically this continuation of war, both against the Ottomans, against raiders in the north, against the later on against the Portuguese and the Dutch and English, because they are because they refuse to bend on faith. The Safavids are continuing to fight a war. They are continuing to fight uprisings, and you have a continual battle to remain in control. Like I said in the lecture, when you have a very strong central government, you need to make sure you don't squeeze too much, or the outsides will break away. And that's what happens with the Safavids. And then the Safavids make the biggest mistake of all. They trust the English and they trust the Dutch. The Dutch and the English begin to buy land in India and in Persia. They begin to rent land, and they see that the Safavids need more money, so they continue to buy more and more land, give them more money, and the Safavids eventually end up owing the Dutch and the English. They turn the tide against the Safavids, and the Dutch and English are going to use what leverage that they have when it comes to trade against the Safavids, where eventually the Safavids will come to the Dutch and the English with their hat in hand, asking for more money as they need to continue to fight. So continue warfare, trying to keep the faith as pure as possible. Forcing this faith onto people is what really leads to the downfall of the Safavids. And we will come back more to this area of the world as we begin to see the ramifications of this continued warfare, and the ramifications of these religious differences throughout the years to come. Any questions about the Safavid? So, like I said, this area becomes much more important later on. Is just a good place to understand where it's coming from. And now we get to the Mughal Empire, India's last stand before the colonial period. the Mughal Empire is even younger than the Safavids. Safavids starting in 1501. The Mughals begin around 1526, and the Mughals have their origins with Babur. Babur is like Osman, like Shah Abbas, is a great diplomat and leader who actually has a great great backstory. If you're going to be creating a hero, this is a great person to have. He is descendant of Genghis Khan, the Great Khan, and also Timur or Tamerlane, the Turkic Persian king that brings that basically extends the Islamic Golden Age in the 12th century. In the 13th century, bringing that forward even more. So you have this great line of conquerors that lead to Babur, and Babur, knowing this, understanding his lineage, moves and advances his people. His land is around Kabul, the land in modern day Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here is the land that Babur actually controls. So basically, he starts around Kabul, and by 1525, he's going to have all this land and start his first dynasty. So, moving into this land, you're moving into India. You're moving into a land that is almost exclusively Hindu. You are a Muslim minority. How do you rule effectively? How is it that there are so many more Hindu people than there are Muslim rulers at this time? How do you rule effectively? What is it that you do? How would you rule effectively? Brian, what would you do?
Set up puppets.
Set up puppet states. Put people in charge that you like or that like you, and make sure that you keep them happy. Anyone else? What would you do? If you were moving into this new area and you're now in charge, you've conquered them, at least militarily, but physically they outnumber you. Yes, Jackie.
I was gonna say house fear, like give fear to people.
Yeah.
Um,
Basically, you're going to go in and chop some heads, make some heads roll to put the fear into people. Anyone else? How do you rule effectively? Nathaniel, that's right. Give them a better life than they had before. And that's one of the things that they do. They do all three of those things. They come in as warriors, riding into a land and defeating them, making people take notice, fear. They are going to create a new nobility to give them puppets, to create puppet states, basically. And as Nathaniel said, they're going to give a better life than they had before. You're going to come to a land, and in the first half of world history, we go over Hinduism. And one of the things about Hinduism is that you are stuck in a some forms of Hinduism, you are stuck in a circle of death and reincarnation, birth and rebirth. You're going to find yourself in this circle, but then here come and so wherever you find yourself in society, you are that's where you deserve to be. If you are poor, You did something in your past life that made you this way. This caste system. You have this very strict hierarchy that you can never move out of. But here come these new people. You're terrified of them. And then they come and it looks like they're going to kill you, but instead they say, convert to this religion where as soon as you die in this life, you have a paradise awaiting you. Instead of having to be continually born and reborn and maybe one day getting out of it. You know, your suffering will lead to salvation. You know, there are people, as Brian said, there are people there that are untouchable. They're the lowest of the low. And whenever someone comes in and says, you know, you can change, you know, you can change your religion, and then basically you will have salvation afterwards. That basically gives them not only a better life there, but a better life afterwards. And so this is what they do. This is how they rule effectively. They're able to give people hope. They're able to change the way things happen, and you know, and Babur basically is ready to give them a better life, but Babur dies, and poor leaders come afterwards. After Babur dies, his kids aren't the best. That is a mild way of putting it. Let's see, I believe this is Humayun, who is a very inept leader. He's the one that has the gap in his rule, where the Sur Empire comes in. And as Joseph said, basically they let them help make the laws, help them make society, because the Sur Empire comes in, takes over, and sets off to making this new empire that actually works a lot better than the Mughal Empire under Humayun. Fixes all the corruption, creates standard currency, helps creates a better legal system, a much cleaner sanitation system. So the Sur Empire from 1540 to 1555 is basically making these new laws, and then the Mughals come in with the help of the Safavids and take back over, and Akbar the Great, the new king, says, you guys did a pretty good job, but we'll take it from here. And Akbar the Great creates this new society. Akbar the Great takes the laws that were created there, makes them better. Akbar the Great tries to create a syncretic system. We saw with the Ottomans that, you know, all this tolerance led to too many vassal states that had a lot of power. You had the Safavids that had a lot of power, but their intolerance made people hate them. So what Akbar and the Mughals do is try to meld those two systems, to try to meld basically every system together. So he creates puppets out of the nobility that he conquers. So basically, if he fights you in battle and captures you, he gives you, if you fought nobly, he says, you can join me or die. And that's usually a pretty easy situation there. Especially if by joining him, you get to still be a nobleman. So he tries to mix the nobility of his own people with that of the Hindu people that he's conquering. He tries to create this new writing system, this new language known as Urdu, And this new language system is trying to mix Arabic, the Persian language, and Hindu and the Hindi language. And this language, still exists to this day. Urdu is one of the official languages of Pakistan, I believe. It's Pakistan. And he also tries to meld religions, and this is where he runs into a lot of trouble. Basically, Akbar grew up very curious about religion. Akbar grew up very curious about philosophy, and he read a lot. And when he comes in as the new leader, he has people come to his court: Buddhist monks, Confucianist teachers, Zoroastrian priests, Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Protestants, Jewish rabbis. He has everybody, and even Sunni and Shia imams. He has them come and debate him and talk to him about religion. And pretty soon he gets fed up with the strictness of his Islam, and he says, I'm going to meld Islam and Hinduism. I'm going to create a new religion. I'm going to make everybody happy. That's my goal. By creating this new religion, everyone's going to be happy. There's going to be something for everyone. And what happens when you try to make everybody happy?
Nobody's happy.
Nobody is happy. Both the Muslim and Hindu people see this as sort of a slap in the face. Din-e-Ilahi, a new religion coming together, the great religion where everything has truth. Very Unitarian here. There's truth in everything. It's all different ways to find God, and no one likes that, and everyone's unhappy. So he basically, after that, he's just like, well, I did everything I could for you guys. And he begins to sort of retreat from public view. He begins to sort of shy away from much more of these issues. And so it is impossible to make everyone happy. If it's one thing that that anybody that's ever been as a manager or supervisor knows, that it's impossible to make everyone happy. Someone is going to not like it. The more that you try to make everyone happy, eventually you are going to be unhappy. And so that's what happens here with Akbar. He tries to create syncretism. He tries to synchronize everything, combine everything together, not only culturally, but also religiously. And that is where he runs into issues, is trying to create a new religious system. But one of the things that actually does improve during this time is the role of women in India. Has anybody heard of Suti? Of the practice of Suti? Well then, let's see which one. Let's go with Emma. Emma, hello.
Hi.
Let's say that you are a noblewoman in India before this, and your husband dies. Okay. You have a rich husband. He dies. He has to take all of his possessions with him into the next life. Guess what? You're a possession as well. So he gets to take you into the next life, and you are expected to basically commit suicide by something like jumping into burning into a funeral pyre, or poisoning yourself before him. That doesn't sound great, does it? No. So that is part of the rituals, part of some of the Hindu customs that greet the. It's not as widespread as it had once been, but this is a custom that is found there, and it is one of those customs that is done away with for the most part with the Mughals. The Mughals are, because suicide is a sin. It is seen as unworthy, and so it is done away with. And the role of women actually begins to improve in India. In India, you have a much stricter patriarchal system than even in Islam that comes in, and so women couldn't own property. Women couldn't do anything. Even widowed women had to be taken by their family, or they were sent out away if no one could take care of them. And instead, widows get more rights to own the property that their husbands owned, to do business if their husbands were merchants, or if their husbands had some sort of business, they could continue to run it. So women have that opportunity as well. And if you look in the background of this slide, what is that in the background? Anybody recognize this UNESCO World Heritage Site? Brian, you're shaking your head.
Taj Mahal.
That is the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is a mausoleum for Mumtaz Mahal, the wife of, I believe it's Jahangir, of the Emperor Jahangir, was it Jahangir or was it? I can't remember which one it was. But what happens is that she passes away. She's his favorite wife, and so he builds this mausoleum. So he builds this beautiful mausoleum for his wife. He's heartbroken, and he's going to build the most beautiful building in India for her, and he does. And so from here on out, any man that ever wants to do anything nice to their wife, this is what you have to compete with right here. You know, this is the epitome of what you do. And so the emperor eventually is deposed by his son, and ends up living there to his death. And so he basically ends up living with his wife, with his deceased wife, in her mausoleum. So women get more of a reverence than they had before, but it is still a patriarchal culture. Even though it is not as harsh as the Vedic Hindus were in before the Mughals came in, it is still a society that puts men in the center. It is still a society that treats women as lesser, even though they can have more things. They can only have more things if they were rich to begin with, or if their husbands pass away. So they are still subservient to their husbands. So as I said, you have the changing of society for the better because of this change in religious ideals, where Akbar tries to change things, but as Akbar dies, his sons are less and less capable, and his sons are more and more corrupt. Jahangir is his eldest and most only remaining son. Akbar wasn't a great dad. One of his kids drank himself to death, and the other one OD'd on opium. And his oldest and least accomplished, Jahangir, becomes the new emperor, and basically doesn't want to deal with ruling, and so he gives more power to the nobility, and corruption grows. And then Shah Jahan was the one that created the Taj Mahal. Shahabuddin Muhammad Shah Jahan takes over and begins to make the Islam of the Mughals much more fundamentalist and much more aligned with a fundamental reading of the Quran, less about cultural tolerance, more about cultural totalitarianism. And then Shah Jahan himself is deposed by his son Aurangzeb. And his son Aurangzeb is going to completely undo all of the religious tolerance that Akbar the Great had done. So Akbar is his great grandfather, and so by the time it gets to Aurangzeb, he's going to begin to fight again, fighting against the Safavids and fighting against the Ottoman as well, to try and conquer more land and convert more people. He's going to go to war also with the Portuguese. But during this time, he does conquer all of this land. So he basically adds, almost doubles the land of the Mughal Empire. But because of all of this war, because of the costs that occur, he has to borrow more and more money. And he borrows from the British. He borrows from the Dutch, just like the Persians do. And the British and the Dutch come in, and it's not the British government, it's not the Dutch government. Instead, it's private companies begin to buy up land. The Dutch East India and the English East India begin to buy up land. And they begin to take the resources and they begin to send profits back home. So pretty much by the 18th century, middle of the 18th century, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, you have India almost 60 to 65% under British rule. And that's just from them buying up land. They don't have to conquer them militarily. They conquer them economically. And part of that is because Aurangzeb's desire for more land, Aurangzeb's desire to become this great Islamic leader that will basically take over all of India and then move into Persia and in towards Asia and Europe. That's his grand design. But instead he spends money, fighting against Europeans, fighting against other Muslims, and eventually leading into debt and allowing the Europeans to come in and piece by piece take his empire out from under him. And because of this, India, which was once a prosperous, under the Mughals, India was a prosperous land that was slowly and surely modernizing and becoming a powerful state, instead becomes a holding of the British government. The green area to the south was uncontrolled land. Sri Lanka and some of these lands are still uncontrolled to this day. If you guys remember the tribe that has not had contact with Europeans or anything like that, they're actually off the coast of India. So a lot of these lands have not been conquered by anyone until the British come in. So this great empire of Aurangzeb slowly breaks up, and the Indian subcontinent becomes a part of the English Empire. Persia becomes basically broken up by European forces. The Ottoman Empire becomes broken up by European forces. And so by the 18th century, by the 1700s, the Islamic world is not a threat to Europe. Europe does not have to worry about invasions from the East or worry about what their moves are going to, or how their moves are going to affect the East and what sort of retaliation they can expect from the East. And so the Islamic world is not, doesn't become important to world events in the West. It's still important to events in the Middle East and in the East, but as far as the West, European forces are able to fight against one another. European forces are able to go out into North America, South America, into Africa and the East Indies, and they're able to gain a lot of the resources. I mean, you know, as Brian said, like right after break, imagine the world where the Ottoman Empire, you know, has a colony in the New World, a thriving colony. Imagine a world where the Ottoman Empire is an ally of Queen Elizabeth. You know, that they are able to contain, they're able to contain France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. You know, imagine what could have been, but instead what happens is that the Islamic world turns in and doesn't focus on the West. Instead focuses on itself, has to reform, has to expand from within. And so you have basically a couple of centuries where the Islamic world is left behind, as far, at least politically and economically. And that is the most important consequence of this, is that Europe doesn't have to worry about them. Europe is free to expand. Europe is free to conquer. And so next week, we will look at that conquest. We will look at that exploration and expansion. We'll be looking at the at Southeast Asia, at the desire for goods and for the spices of Southeast Asia. We'll be looking at the colonization of the Americas, and we'll be looking at the slave trade that results from that. Does anybody have any questions here as we wrap up this class period?
Just a quick one. When did Buddhism come into play in India? I know Buddha originated in India.
Buddhism is way before this. By the time the Mongols come in, Buddhism has all but been wiped away from India. Yes, we'll be looking at the New World, and then in the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking at the New World and then China and Japan. So yes, that is the next class periods. No, double check our syllabus real quick to see what else is due. Like I said, there is a third part to the lecture that didn't get uploaded with the other two parts. So if you haven't gone through that, that goes over the Mughals, goes more into more in depth than what I went into. Let's see if there's anything else. No. Let me pull this up real quick. All right. Yes. Next week will be the European ascendancy, and then the week after that will be China and Japan. Just wanted to double check, make sure I didn't change that up on you guys. All right. Okay. So if you've watched all three of them, you're ready to go. Everything will open up here later on today. And like I said, I'll get the first first reading assignment graded this weekend, so you guys can see exactly what I want. See where you're, what I, I'll give you guys enough feedback so you know exactly. The homework is going to be the discussion question. So yeah, that's more, your opinion, talk it out, get some good conversation going there. You will have a reading assignment, which is at least a couple of paragraphs worth. Basically, it's a compare and contrasting of the three empires that we just looked at as far as their religious ideals go. And then you'll have your quiz, your multiple choice quiz. Those three things will be what is due for next week. So anything else? Everyone's doing great. Everyone's going to be passing with flying colors. Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, if you do have any questions, just send me a message, and I'll get back to you. And other than that, that's it. Everyone have a great week.
Great class, Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Professor
Joseph.
Lopez.
Thanks, Joseph. You have a great week.
You too.
Hi, Professor. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you.
I'm his mom. I just been helping him take the notes.
Oh, yeah.
What I was trying to find out on the two assignments that he had,
Mm-hmm.
we was trying to print it out, the reading
Yes.
that you had with it, and so we had a problem printing it out because I was gonna go over it and show him how to highlight it.
Okay.
So is it a possibility that we can take it and finish the discussion and the other, because I did not understand it. I was just like, oh, okay. And then I looked at it and said it was supposed to be two, not one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
So
that's fine.
is that okay?
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. All right. So we'll get it into you hopefully by tomorrow evening. We'll get it into you. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Bye, Carlos.
Bye-bye.
I had a question.
Yes, Alex.
It was regarding how I sent you a message regarding the reading assignment for the chapter 1.
Yes.
Do you want me to turn that in tonight?
If you haven't been able to, go ahead and look on the modules page. I just put up the first chapter.
Uh-huh.
And if you turn it in after today, it'll be fine. Just because I know that some people still don't have the books.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can try to get it in tonight. But just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you can get it in tonight, get it in tonight. If you need a little bit more time, don't worry about it. I understand.
Okay, thank you.
I understand.
And Professor, he would have his book by Sunday.
Okay.
That's going to help him out a lot, having an actual book.
Yeah. So if you need anything else, just let me know, and I'll.
Okay, we will.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lopez.
Thank you.
Hey, Professor Lopez, I just have a question.
Yes.
I emailed you a few days ago about an honors project. Am I able to still do that for that class? Okay,
Yes.
sweet.
Yes, I was just didn't get back, and I was like, I'll just talk to him after class.
Oh no, you're totally okay. Thank you. Sweet.
Yeah. So just basically come up with a subject from 1500 up until, let's say, like the 20th century, something that you really want to read up on, or something that you're really interested in.
Okay.
As far as historically, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, awesome. I'll let you know in the next few days then.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.